Hi guys, I hope you are all well and welcome to the second video of C++ for beginners. In this video we are going to talk about variables, data types, and also I'm going to explain how you can enter data in your program and how that data is encoded into numbers using something called ASCII table. So here I have opened Visual Studio, and if you are not familiar with Visual Studio or there is some code that you see here but you don't understand it, I would recommend you to watch my first video of this course. The link is going to be in the description of this video, and then come back to this video. So let's talk about variables now. What is variable? Well, I like to explain it through a real life example. For example, you see this glass here. Well, what I can say about this glass is that it is a container for a certain type of liquid. So it can hold water, milk, tea, juice, whatever you want really. And the same way, a variable is a container, but for a certain data type. So you can put whole number inside it, you can put character or a decimal point number or a Boolean value meaning true or false value. So they are the same in this aspect. Another thing that I can say about this glass is that it defines a maximum amount of liquid that it can hold. So it has a max limit. And if you put too much, it will overflow. The same way with variables. Variables also define a maximum amount of data that they can hold. For example, if you have a whole number variable, well, there is a max number limit for that variable that it can hold. And also, if you put too much, it is going to overflow. It is literally called data type overflow. So it is a container, the same as variable, and also it defines a maximum amount of data that it can hold. But how much data you really put inside that variable? So the same way with the water inside this glass, if you decide to put 1/3 or 1/2 or 2/3 of this glass, the same way is with variables. You can put however much you want as long as you don't put too much, because then it's going to overflow. One thing that is different though between variables and this glass is that you can put one day inside this glass you can put water, the next day you can put juice, the next day you can put milk, then tea, or even you can mix two liquids. But with variables you cannot do that, at least not with ones in C++. There are certain languages that you can do that with, and there is also advantages and disadvantages when it comes to that, but in C++ you cannot put two different data types inside one variable, and you can also not change a data type of variables once you create it. So let me show you what I'm talking about on a practical example. Let's say that you want to create a variable that is going to hold your annual salary. Well, that variable is definitely going to be a decimal point number, or also floating point number. That's how it's called in C++. And the type that is used for that is called float. So I'm going to say float. And then I'm going to give a name to that variable. Since we said that it's going to hold annual salary, we are going to call it annual salary. Okay. And then we are going to assign it a value, and that value is going to be, let's say, 50,000.99. So now what I have done here is I have created a variable called annual salary. I have said that that variable is going to be of type floating point number, and then I have put inside that variable 50,000.99. So now let's see how we can, based on this variable, based on our annual salary, calculate how much our user is earning every month. So what we are going to do is we are going to create another variable. We are going to call it monthly salary, and we are going to assign that variable a result of dividing this annual salary with 12 months. So we are creating a variable of type float also, since the result of division usually can be also floating point number or decimal number, and because of that we are using also float type for our monthly salary variable. So I'm creating monthly salary variable, and I'm going to say that that variable is going to hold result of this expression, annual salary divided by 12 months. And now we have result of this division inside this variable, and what we are left to do is to write that result out to our user. So I'm going to say cout, since that's the command that we use to output data to console, and I'm going to say your monthly salary is, and I'm going to say monthly salary. So one thing to notice here is that when you are writing out strings, or when you're writing out data like this, you use quotation marks. But when you want to write out the value that you are holding inside a variable, well, then you just put the name of your variable. You don't use any quotation marks then. And now we can run our program, and let's see what's the result that we got. You see here your monthly salary is 4,166.75. So if you want to check that out, you can calculate it in your calculator. One thing that that bothers me in this program is that we have hard-coded this value here. So we have hard-coded this 50,000.99. Not everyone's salary is 50,000.99. And what if we wanted our user to enter what his salary is during the execution of our program? So when he runs our program should ask him, what is your annual salary? And then he enters that salary, and then we calculate his monthly salary based on the number that he has entered. So I would like to upgrade this program now to work like I just explained. And how we are going to do that? Well, first I'm going to delete these 50,000.99. Okay. And then we are left with this situation here. So it says float annual salary. That means that I have just created a variable called annual salary, and I have said I'm going to put a floating point number inside that variable, but I have not assigned any value to it yet. So here we have a container for our annual salary, and that container doesn't hold any value. And if we try to run our program now, what do you think that we are going to get? Write that in the comments before I run this program. And now I'm going to so pause the video and think about it, and then write your answer in the comments. And now I'm going to run the program, and you can see that we have some build errors, as this here this window here says. So let's see, if we open this part here, it says we have one error, and that error is uninitialized local variable annual salary used. What that means is that this expression here, if you see this green underline, it also says using uninitialized memory annual salary. Well, that means that this expression here, our computer doesn't know how to do this expression, since we haven't assigned any value to our annual salary variable. So it doesn't know how to divide that with 12, since there is no value inside that container, inside that variable. So this causes a compiler error, and whoever has written that compiler error is going to occur, he was right. So what we have to do to correct this is we have to ask our user to enter his annual salary. So what we are going to do now is, let's see first. The command that we use to output data from our program into our console is cout, so console output. And the command that we use to input data is console input, or cin. So I'm going to say cin, and then we use these other redirection signs, and then we say what is the variable that we want to store what our user has entered, and I'm going to say annual salary. So what I have said here is our user is going to console input the data, and then whatever he has inputted, you have to redirect that inside our annual salary variable. So now, if I run my program now, you see that our program runs now, so there is no compile time error. And also our cursor is blinking. Well, it is blinking because it expects here our user to enter annual salary. But this is not really clear to someone who has not made this program. So what we have to do, if I enter some value now, well, it is going to calculate it correctly, but this is not really user-friendly. So what we have to do is we have to write a message to our user before he enters anything so that he knows what he should enter. So before this cin command, I'm going to say cout, and I'm going to say, please enter your annual salary. Okay. And now, if I run my program, you are going to see, please enter your annual salary, and the cursor is blinking, waiting for you to enter the value. And if I say, for example, 40,000, you see that your monthly salary is 33333. So the program has calculated your monthly salary, and the number is based on whatever our user decides to input. So we have upgraded our program. And there is also one more thing that I would like to show you when we are doing this example, and that is, let's say that we want to calculate how much money our user is going to earn in 10 years. So let's say cout, in 10 years you will earn, and now we have to put a value of how much money he is going to earn. And if you look at this situation here, we first created our monthly salary variable, and we then assigned it a value of annual salary divided by 12. But there is another way that we can write out results of expressions without creating any variables, if that is what we need. And that is just here. So in this line, in 10 years you will earn, you add these redirection signs, and then you say expression that you want your computer to calculate. And what we want to calculate is how much our user is going to earn in 10 years. So that is annual salary times 10. And if you do it this way, so if you don't decide to create a variable, then you will not be able to use result of this expression later in your program. So you don't have a container that holds this 10-year salary, but you have a container that holds annual salary and monthly salary. So each time that you want to write out or do something with your 10-year salary, you will have to write this expression, while if you want to do something with your monthly salary, you have a container that is holding that value directly for you and you can access it. So if we run our program now, you see it expects us to enter our annual salary, let's say 50,000. And you see here your monthly salary is 4,166.67, and then in 10 years you will earn, what is this, 500,000. So okay, one thing that we are missing here and that you can add is end line or \n. So you can add it here, and your program is going to format your text nicely. So this line should go here like this. If I add here one more end line, and if I run my program again, you see enter 50,000, and now we have our text formatted nicely because of this end line that I have just added. Let's now create another variable, and this time we are going to create a variable of type character. So char, that is the type that is used for character variables in C++, it's called char, and let's name our variable character. And when you want to assign a value to a character variable in C++, what you use is these single quotes, like this. If you see this example here, when we are writing out text, so string of text, we use these double quotation marks. But when we want to assign a character value of a character variable, we use these single quotations, like here. And there are also some more rules when it comes to naming your variables. And the most important one, in my opinion, and the most important one to make it easier to you, is to name your variables according to their purpose. So give meaningful names to your variables. That is really, really important. For example, you see this monthly salary variable here. We could have as well named this variable blah, 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 and copy it here also, because we are having compiler error right now, because our compiler does not know what this variable really is. You see, it says identifier is undefined because you have not created this variable here, because it supposes that it is a variable, but it has not been created before, so it does not recognize what this variable is. So we have to copy the new name here also, and now our compile time error disappears. And this here, this name, does not represent anything to your computer, so your computer is now going to run your program, and your program is going to work just the same as it did before. But this is really making it hard for you to understand what your code is doing. And especially if you come to this, for example, in 10 days, or someone else tries to understand your program, this is really hard to read. And he will just try to uncover really what your program is doing without understanding it, because you have used these blah 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 names for your variables. The same situation would be if you, for example, have 3 boxes inside your kitchen, and you use one for storing sugar and flour and salt. And instead of naming those sugar, flour, salt, respectively, you decide to name them red box, green box, and blue box. And then someone else comes to your house, someone else comes to your program, he does not really know where to find sugar, because red does not mean that that box is storing sugar. So you should name that box sugar box, because imagine 3 is easy to remember, but imagine having 10 boxes or 10 variables or 100 of them, or even 1,000, which is very common inside large programs. So what you should do, and I am going to do, is return that previous name, so monthly salary, and here also. So you should give meaningful names to your variables. That is very important, and that is the first rule. The second rule is that, well, the second and third and the fourth are the rules that you will have to obey in most cases, because if you don't, then you are just going to get a compile time error in 99% of the cases, let's say. And I'm not going to say what that 1% is, because I want you to obey these rules. So when it comes to naming your variables, another thing is that your variable names cannot contain any special characters except underscore. So like this. This here is valid name to your variable. But if you try, for example, to name your variable like this, so you say plus character, you see that here in this error window it says expected an identifier. So you cannot use this to name your variable. Or this, you cannot say character with this minus inside it, so character minus ter. So these signs, these special signs, are used for something else. They are operators inside C++. And you are not supposed to use those inside your variable names. If you really want to use some special signs, what you should and can use is underscore, like this. So this is the only sign that is allowed and that I recommend for you to use for naming your variables. That's the second rule. The third rule is that your variable names cannot begin with numbers, like this. So you cannot say 8 character, for example. It also says expected an identifier. But what you can do is you can say, for example, character 8. That is a valid name. So a number can be on any other position except on the first position. So this is a valid name for a variable. So you can put also number here. So you can say, for example, C12 character 8. But again, what does that really mean? That is not a meaningful name for a variable. So again, we come to the first rule. So you should name your variables according to their purpose. So I'm going to return this to character name again. And then we have our third rule, I guess, which is you cannot use space inside your variable names. So for example, this is not valid and your compiler says it here. So it gives you an error. It does not know what this really is. So you cannot use blank spaces inside your variable names because you are going to get a compile time error. And if I try to do that and I try to run my program, I get the window. So it says, you cannot run this program. You have syntactic errors. What you should do is you should correct those errors and then you can really run your program like this. Okay. So let's repeat these rules one more time. The first rule is that you should give meaningful names to your variables. So name them according to their purpose. The second rule is that your variables cannot contain any special characters except underscore. The third rule is that your variables cannot start with numbers. You can put number on any other position, but not on the first one. And the third rule is that, and the fourth rule actually is that your variables cannot contain blank spaces. So empty spaces, no in a variable name. What you should do is you should name your variables according to their purpose, so meaningfully, and you should also use something called camel casing. What is camel casing? You see how I have named this annual salary here. You see that the first letter of my variable name is small letter, and then the next word starts with capital letter, and that is called camel casing. So for example, you would name your variable like this: first, second, third. So like this. You see that this first, second, third, these are words inside your variable name, and this F is lowercase letter, that's the start letter of your variable, and then each next word begins with capital letter and all the rest is lowercase letters. That is called camel casing, and that is something that is usually used with C++. Let's talk about data types now. I am going to delete this code, so if you need this code for a bit longer, you can pause the video here. So, what kind of data can we store in our variables? Well, for now we are going to cover only the most basic ones, the ones that we are going to use frequently, and you should know that there are a lot more data types besides from these that we are going to mention here, and more complex ones that we are going to cover later in these videos, in this tutorial. So the first one that I would like to mention is a whole number data type. So integer, a data type that can hold negative whole numbers, 0, and positive whole numbers. So the type that is used for that in C++ is called int. And good example for int variable is, let's say, year of birth. So that is an example of a whole number variable. And let's say that that variable is going to hold 1995. Okay, so that would be an integer variable. After that, we have already seen this. So it is a character variable. So let's say char. And an example of a char variable could be gender, for example. Let's call it gender. And you can store F for female or M for male, for example. So the char variable can store one character. Then the next one is Boolean value, meaning true or false value. This is the simplest one, and the type that is used to store Boolean is called bool. And a good example for a bool value could be, for example, if you want to hold in your program a variable that tells you whether your user is older or younger than 18 years old. So let's call our variable is older than 18. And we can assign to that variable either value of true or false. So I'm going to put true here. Another variable, another data type is decimal point number, also called floating point number, which we have mentioned before. And let's create a variable of type float. And let's say that that variable is going to hold our average grade. So average grade. And this average grade can also be a whole number, but since it has potential to be also floating point number or a decimal point number, we are going to use a float data type for this average grade. And another data type that I would like to mention for also storing decimal numbers is called double. And the difference between double and float is that double is double size of float. So if you remember when we talked previously about taking memory space that variables take, so float is taking 4 bytes and double is taking double of that, so 8 bytes. So you can put much more data inside your double data type than inside float. And let's say, for example, that if you had a credit card and you had a lot of money, a lot of money, and you want to store that value inside a variable, you would use a double data type. So let's say double balance equals to this large number here, which I'm not going to even try to read. Okay. So these are the most common data types that we are going to use in this tutorial. I have said earlier that each data type takes a certain space in memory, but let's see exactly how much each of these take. For that, we are going to use something called Sizeof operator, and let's see how we use it. So cout Sizeof int is, and then we write this Sizeof. So Sizeof, and in parentheses we pass to it data type that we want to check how much memory it is using. So int. And if I run my program now, you see that it says that int takes 4 bytes of memory. And if you've ever actually studied binary algebra, you would know that 4 bytes of memory is actually 32 bits, since each byte has 8 bits. And as we said, our int can store both positive and negative numbers, and 0 also, remember that. So the first of these 32 bits is used to determine whether the number has plus sign or minus sign, so whether it's a positive or a negative number, and then remaining 31 bits are used for this value itself. So let's check what is min value for our int. Let's write that out. Let's write cout int min value is, and we have a reserved word for minimal amount for int in C++, and that is int underscore min. And if I run my program now, you see that it says this minus 2 billion, extremely hard to read this number, but you see that this is the minimal amount of int. So this number is actually 2 to the power of 31. Let's just quickly write these. So minus 1, minus 2, minus 3, and then minus this number here. So this number, as I said, is 2 to the power of 31. Why not 32? Because this 1 byte is used to represent this minus prefix. Now we should check a positive number range. So we also can write int max value is, and then there is another keyword in C++ for int max, which is int underscore max. And are you expecting to see this same interval but just with plus sign? So write in the comments, what are you expecting to see? And if I run my program, you see that that did not happen. And if some of you know why it did not happen, I would also like to hear what you think, why we have this number here and then this number here for our negative and for our positive range so different ending number. And I'm going to explain why. Because this positive range here, we have to include 0 also. So in order to include one number here, let's just copy this and paste it. So our positive range is going to from 1 up to, let's say that it is this number, but since it is including 0 also, in order to include one number here, so 0, you have to take one number here. So this here is not 8 anymore, but is 7. So that is why we got, let's say, different number for our positive and negative range, because this here includes 0 also. One thing that I have to mention though is that if you want to use only positive integer numbers, there is a data type for that as well. And the data type that is used for that is called unsigned int. And its size is the same as of int, so 4 bytes or 32 bits. But since it is unsigned, that means that it does not use 1 bit for sign, because the sign is by default plus, but it uses all 32 bits to represent value, and those values go from 0 to, let's see exactly how big of a number, 4 billion and something. So cout size of unsigned int is, and let's see, size of unsigned int, this is the data type. And let's also write out what is the max value of unsigned int. So let's say cout uint max value is, and there is also a reserved word for that, and that is uint underscore max. So if I run my program now, you see that we got 4 billion and something number, so double the size of this. And this is actually 2 to the power of 32, but minus 1, because we are also including 0 in this range. So let's check these remaining data types. I'm going to write those out quickly and I will be back. So I have written here the rest of these data types, and as you can see, since our bool is only true or false value, 1 byte is enough for bool. Our char is using also 1 byte, float is using 4 bytes, double is using 8, and I'm also going to include a table with some more data types which we haven't mentioned here, so if you need to check those out, please pause the video. One thing that I promised to show you is data type overflow. Let's see what that is. So let's create a variable of type int and call it int max, and let's say that I want to store inside that variable maximum amount of int, so int underscore max. And I'm going to write that variable out now just to see how big of a value that really is. So cout int max, and if I run my program now, you see that I have gotten here this 2 billion, very large number actually. So that is the max amount of int. Now my question for you is, what is going to happen in this situation? So cout int max plus 1. What is going to be the result of our program now if I run it? So some of you may know this already, some of you may not, but I am very interested in reading your answers. So make sure to write your answers before watching my explanation on this. Write those in the comments down below. And if I run my program now, well, our number has not increased by 1, but it has went to the minimal amount of int. And why has that happened? Well, that is the data type overflow that I was talking about. And how this works actually is it works the same as your clock works. So it goes 9, 10, 11, 12, and then from 12, since that is the max value on your clock, it does not go to 13, but it goes back to min, so 1, 12, and then 1. And that is applicable here. It went from the max value to min value just by adding 1. And that is called data type overflow. I already can see that this video is pretty long, and I'm currently having problems uploading very long videos to YouTube. So I'm going to leave for the next video explanation of ASCII table, and we are also going to do some more examples and practice C++ some more. So make sure to subscribe to my channel and also click the bell icon so that you are first to be notified when I upload my next video, and also like it and share it with anyone who you think could benefit from this video. And I will see you in the next one.